We are good to go. It's recording.
Wonderful. Well, Allison, I will punt the ball your way as you are the primary facilitator today. First and foremost, I certainly appreciate your willingness to join us and your collaboration and sharing your expertise as a part of this endeavor. Matt and Beth, thank you all for inviting us to this space to engage in what I hope to be a very rich and meaningful discussion regarding mental well-being, mental health, and transfer students. So thank you all for being here, to our participants, and looking forward to the discussion.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Allison Davis-Waddle. I'm one of our staff psychologists at the Counseling Center at App State. And I tend to be a talker. So if you all have things that you want to say or things that you want to contribute as part of this, questions you want to ask, you can do the little hand raise thing. You can unmute yourself and chat with us. But I'm going to try to be super intentional about holding some space for that and letting you all contribute or ask questions as we go. So I'm going to share my screen here this morning, and I'm not going to put it in present mode just yet because I wanted to start with a little bit of a poll to get some conversations going. So I don't know if any of you all have ever used Poll Everywhere before, but if you wouldn't mind starting by texting this text right here to 37607, if you have easy access to your phone. That will get you connected to our poll here. And I'll leave that up here for just a second. I'm going to have 3 questions that I'm going to ask you all. So once everybody starts to get connected, then we'll be able to get that going. All right. So those of you who are already in the poll and ready to go, my first question is, what feeling comes up for you when you think about transferring? So the way that this is going to come up, it's going to be a word cloud. So if you just text whatever word it is that comes up for you, that should come in and we should see that pop up here on the screen if I have done it correctly, which is questionable, but we'll see. Thought that one might come up. Also that one. So if you all have not done one of these word clouds before, the words that are sent in most often are the words that get the biggest. So excited is the one that's popping out so far as our most popular. And you can definitely feel more than one way about transferring. So if you have multiple responses that you want to put in here, you absolutely can. Oh man, all right. I like all of these. So we're definitely going to talk about that feeling of excitement. Anxiety is always something that I think comes up when folks think about doing something new, and I saw new pop up there somewhere as well. We are going to talk about ways to potentially help build community and to help navigate some of that confusion, and to talk a little bit about the realities of what it might look like to transfer. So I'm going to go ahead and close that one down, and then we're going to pop to the next one. What do you do for self-care? And again, as the reminder, if it's more than one word, you can put them together as one word, you can hyphenate, but they'll pop up as separate words if you type up more than one word. I have several folks that are doing some meditation, which is fantastic. Oh, music. That one's mine. Cocoon. I like that. Wow, y'all are quick. I don't know how many people are in here, but those responses are coming in fast. got lots of movement. We've got some artistic stuff in here, faith-based stuff, social stuff. Music really rising to the top there. That's awesome. Okay. So you all are prepared, thinking about what you're doing for self-care. I want you to hold those things in mind as we go through our presentation today. I'm going to go ahead and move us to our last question, and then we'll dive in, which is, what is your major or your anticipated major as you're going into college or transferring institutions? I'd like to have a little bit of an idea for who I'm talking to and who might be showing up today. Wow, tons of variety. Oh my gosh. That's incredible. Okay. Education majors, folks in the public health field, some tech, some psychology folks. Have to obviously do a shout out for that. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for participating with me a little bit this morning. I always like to start out with something that gets people a little bit involved before I go into talk mode. So I'm going to go ahead and start us in presentation mode. All right, so some of the things that you might expect from our presentation here today, I want to talk a little bit about navigating expectations versus the realities of what could happen as you're transferring institutions. I think a really big disservice that often happens for folks who are going into college or going into a new environment is not talking about the realities of what that might look like. And so that's something that I really want us to spend some time talking about today, and can hopefully address some nerves or excitements about that. Finding ways to cope with stress and build resilience. So adjustments to things are stressful. So helping you navigate a toolbox and create a toolkit for you to come into this setting or any setting that you're going into and build some resilience around that to support yourself differently. Finding and using resources, I think, is one that is obviously going to look a little bit different no matter where you're going and what institution that you're transferring to. So we're going to talk pretty broadly about things that you might be able to expect from the institution that you're going to, but I think more concretely ways to find those things and to get connected to those things. And then finally, getting involved, just because I know that that is something that a lot of the transfer students that I have talked with have struggled to maybe do more so than students who are coming in and staying at their institution from the get-go. All right, so in terms of the way that I hear folks talk about college most often. So again, I work in the counseling center, and so I tend to talk with a lot of folks who are struggling, maybe more so than folks who feel like things are going really well. And I think from that perspective, something that's really important to highlight is that there's this kind of societal expectation that when folks go to college, it's going to be the best time of your life, and you're going to have so much fun, and you're going to make so many friends, and you're going to be so involved, and there are so many things that are going to happen and feel great and amazing and wonderful. You're going to connect with your major the first time that you choose a major, and it's going to be great, and you're going to find your community right off the bat, and you're not going to have struggles adjusting to a new environment and what it might look like. And very often that's actually not the case for folks when they're coming in, at least not all of those parts. So that's not to say that college cannot be fantastic for everybody coming into college. It's just a matter of kind of managing those expectations and how you're kind of coming into it, and what you're thinking it's going to look like versus navigating what it is. And so that's something that I talk with a lot of students about is, okay, well, what is it that you're looking for, and how can we help you find that? How can we help you create a college experience that works really well for you. So I really think that that idea that college is the best time of your life can scare people or make them question what's wrong with them if they're not having the experience that they are coming in expecting to have. And so there's a ton of work that I do around this that I would be happy for us to talk about more later if you'd like. Some of the realities, though, it takes time to adjust to a new place. So some of you all in that first word poll there were talking about something being new. And I think newness can be opportunity and it can also be stress. And so whenever somebody is coming into a new environment, there's going to be an adjustment period, and there's not a timeline for what that adjustment period is going to be. So some folks may come in, may dive in week one and feel really connected, really excited. And part of that might be due to the preparedness that was associated with the transfer itself. But other folks take a couple of semesters to adjust to a new environment and to figure out where all the resources are, where they fit, where things feel good and work for them. And so if it takes you longer than a week to adjust to a new campus, give yourself a little bit of grace and compassion around that, because it's something that I think is really hard depending on where you're transferring to, where you're transferring from, what resources and supports you have along the way from your previous institution, your new institution, or even just in your family or friend group, the loved ones that are supporting you in the process. I think, so I put this one up here because I know that this is always an issue in Boone specifically, but I imagine that it is also an issue in other places. So I wanted to talk about that for just a minute. But I think a part of coming to a new institution is also coming to a new city or state, right? And if you're moving from far away, if you're coming from Washington State to Boone, then there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period there. It's going to be really hard to know as much about the area as you want to know before you get there. And so I'm going to talk here in just a little bit about research that I recommend that people do and conversations that I recommend that folks have, just so you're not coming in and adjusting to maybe all these things at the same time, or stressing out about both school and finding everything that you need outside of the college or university setting. So as you're kind of thinking about where you might want to transfer, think about what environment beyond the institution that you're going into and how you feel like that setting or that environment might support you well or better than where you're at now. Some of the things that might be prompting that transfer. It might be, a major. It might be that you just really don't like living in the mountains. It might be that you want to be closer to family and friends. And so all of those are important things to consider as you're considering transferring. And so being mindful of what are the resources available for physicians and for any of the interests that you have, and all of those kinds of things that we'll talk about here in just a little bit, so that you can create an environment for yourself that is supportive. I noticed a chat pop in, but I am sharing my screen, so I don't know if you all can see this as it comes in, but I might have Alex maybe navigating some chat stuff for me as things come up. But I think this fourth one here, the sense of connection and belonging, is difficult, period. It's difficult, period, coming to college. But I think if you are transferring to a new institution and you maybe felt really connected at your old one, or didn't feel connected at your old one, and you're coming into a new place, again, there are those expectations around that and what that might look like. And something that I learned when I went into college, and something that I talk with students a lot about now, is I haven't had to make friends since I was like 5, and I have no idea how to do that right now in a setting where there are thousands of people. And so being able to consider all of the ways that you might be able to foster connection and community, whether on or off campus, I think is something that's really, really important for folks to consider, and can be one of the things that helps you navigate that expectation for college differently. So people are not just gonna come out of nowhere and come up and have a conversation with you probably, and they're gonna be like your best friend forever. And you might not even find in college the group of people that you want to have as part of your life forever. You could have found those when you were a kid, you could have found those in high school, and you might find those when you get into the workforce, or it might be the people that you're working with at your part-time job off campus or on campus. And so just really kind of talking about what it is that you're hoping for, what it is that you're looking for, and how you can find it and create it for yourself, I think is the part that I really want to emphasize today, is that it's not just this feeling or this thing that happens when you go to college. It's something that takes a little bit of finesse in terms of finding it and kind of navigating that. And the last piece that I'll say here, and then maybe kind of pause for questions or other input, is you're gonna have to do some investigative work. And so I didn't see anybody popping up with a major there that was like criminal justice or like investigation oriented, but we all have to do that a little bit when we're coming into a new environment and figuring out how to do some self-reflection to say, what do I want or need from an institution that I'm going to transfer to? What do I want or need for my experience on campus, off campus? What do I want for my connection to my family? All of those kinds of things are things that you're going to be thinking about, as well as, does this place that I'm considering going have the resources that I need to support myself during that process? And so for me, conversations around transferring, coming to App or going somewhere else, that for me is all around transparency and feeling like appropriate, accurate, honest marketing is something that matters a lot. And so I'll talk about some of the ways that you can find answers to some of the questions that you might have, or things that you might be unsure about moving forward. I promised that I talk a lot, so I'm gonna reel it back for just a second. Alex, stuff that you want to add as part of this, or any other folks?
Allison, I think this is great, particularly as you talk about the transition into a new environment and some of those factors that play into it. They're the personal factors, the social factors, the communities you're already a part of, the situations that may have spurred why you are transferring from previous institution into Appalachian. All of those things are important, and I greatly appreciate you encouraging people to do their investigations, their research, understanding what institution, what community, in terms of the lived area. I saw Sandra talked about Boone being a place that was very similar to our current place of residence. That's all important. I was with some transfer students here at App Thursday night, and one of the things that kept coming up in our conversation and discussion was how homey this place felt to everyone in that space. And that was a large part of why they chose to come here. Even if it was different, there was some element of the communal experience in Watauga County and Boone that felt like home to them. And so those pieces are important, definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration, regardless of what institution one might be transferring into. So I love the approach and think this is a wonderful setup for the conversation.
Questions or thoughts that folks have? I can only see a few of you, so. All right, I'll go ahead and keep going then, but please feel free to interrupt me at any point. So this next piece that I want to talk about is coping with stress and fostering resiliency. So resiliency being this idea that you can do and move through hard things, though I think a lot of people wish that difficult things didn't happen, or that they didn't struggle and have hard experiences. I wish that for folks too. And I think it's really important to be able to create that internal experience for yourself and external, where you can navigate that experience differently when if, I guess, it does come up. And so this is going to look different for everybody. And so these are just possibilities for what that might look like. But as I was thinking about the transfer experience specifically, these were some of the things that came up for me. And I very strongly encourage you all to share things with each other, whether it be in the chat or out loud, things that you do or that you're anticipating. So number one is know what works for you. My hope is that you all have found things that are effective for you in terms of coping with stress. But I find that sometimes folks are making it into college and don't really know how to take care of their mental health, don't know about mental health or just, wellness more broadly. And I think there are a wide variety of components of that, and we'll talk about some of those here in just a bit. But you have to be able to find connection with yourself and your experiences. And something that I think a lot of folks think about when they think about this is, what's my hobby? What's my passion? And that one's tricky too, because sometimes when folks have passion, it's really hard to turn that into their major or career because it feels like it takes some of that away. In some of the conversations that I've had, sometimes folks don't have major hobbies, things that they enjoy, things that they do that they qualify as a hobby. And so I have conversations with people all the time about how Netflix can in fact be a hobby. And thinking about how to support yourself more wholly or fully, you have to know what works and what doesn't. And so that could be anything oriented toward things that you think about for coping skills. So it could be things like gratitude practices, art, exercise, community, or planning. So those are things that hopefully maybe don't warrant a lot of explanation around those, but I think there are different things that people think of when they think about those experiences. But gratitude is something that I talk about a lot and something that I think really helps foster that resiliency aspect. And it's not just like a gloss over, everything is happy, bright, rainbow, sunshine. But what are the things that that do feel good for me, do feel connected for me, and how can I use those things to support me in the areas where things are difficult? Creativity and physical movement and social interaction, all of those I feel like are things that can be extremely beneficial for folks, again, depending on what the framing is that you're kind of putting around that. So if I expected myself to come up with a beautiful piece of artwork in any way, that's not going to happen because that is something that is very far from my skill set. And I use that as a form of kind of emotional expression, knowing that it's probably not going to look really great afterward, but kind of serving the purpose as I'm doing it. And then I'm putting in that planning piece. So that one's another one that is pretty individual. So some people really like to plan and some people don't. And 5-year plans are exciting for some people and they're really anxiety inducing for other people. And so what I really want to emphasize in all of this is that transferring and coping with stress, finding community, all of those things are so individual. So if you hear me say nothing else today, please hear me say that, is that it is a very individual experience. And what works for you is not going to be the same thing that works for everybody else. Even if it's the people that you have had in your life for the longest, or you feel like you relate to most, it's still not going to look exactly the same. And that's something that just feels so important. And I think can keep folks from feeling really isolated as part of all of this. So the other part of knowing what works for you is something that Alex kind of mentioned along the way there, which is what's working for you where you're at and what's not working for you where you're at right now. And those might be vague kind of concepts around feeling something feeling homey or something feeling like a community. It might be that you don't have the major that you want, or the major that you thought that you wanted is no longer an option for you, and you're thinking about going to another place because of what it might offer you. So as you're doing your research, as you're doing your investigation, think about what it is that you want from an experience and how other possible institutions might give you, continue to give you the things that you appreciate and also give you things that maybe you didn't have before. I spoke to this a little bit at the beginning, but giving yourself time to adjust is something that's really important. And I think along with that time piece, all of these other pieces go along with that and help kind of determine what that adjustment period looks like, how long it is, how it feels. So making sure that you're checking in with yourself and checking in with others to kind of talk about what's happening for you, whether that be reaching out to therapy resources or friends or folks in your classes. Again, it doesn't matter what that looks like or who that is, but how you do it in the way that supports you best. But just knowing that it's a process that will unfold in some period of time, but we just don't know what that period of time is and how that will kind of progress for some folks. Being willing to ask questions. I put this one on here and am maybe a little bit hypocritical as I share it or think about it, but being willing to ask questions is something that is incredibly important. And I mean that both in the sense of, you know, some of the research that you might be doing, things that you're asking folks about their experiences at the institution that you're thinking about, but also thinking about once you get to a place, how you can find what you need when you're already there. So being willing to reach out to instructors, being willing to go to office hours, being willing to walk into a place and ask a question, even if you don't know if that's the place where you're supposed to be. Hopefully soon we will be walking into places and asking people questions. Zoom somebody, call somebody. But I think that is something that creates a lot of stress and anxiety for folks, is asking questions because they think they should already know, or because they think that somebody might make fun of them, or that it might be embarrassing, somebody might judge them. And that's incredibly unfortunate if that's how somebody is responding to you asking questions and being willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. So my hope is that you can at least find a touch point, someone who you are comfortable asking questions and being willing to say, I don't know this thing. And I think if you have that one person, then you can explore with them. They can help you navigate how to find other things. I always talk about the counseling center when I am talking with folks about kind of being a touch point for folks. So we have people come in all the time and request initial appointments with us, and they ask us questions about things that we don't offer at the counseling center. And that's okay, because what I do and what I say as part of those conversations is, wow, I am so glad that you came here and that you started that process of asking questions. And I will help you get connected to the person who can help you answer that question. And if I don't know the answer to that person's question, then I will find someone else who I can ask that might know the answer to that question. And so then you can kind of start this chain of events where eventually, hopefully quickly, you'll get the answer for the thing that you're looking for. But if you don't know where something is, or who somebody's role is, or who the appropriate quote person to ask the question is, just ask somebody, ask an instructor, ask a friend, and go from there. I think websites can be really helpful in kind of guiding some of the questions that you might have, or at least getting you to the place that you need to be to ask the question about whatever it is that you're asking. And that's less intimidating to type a question into a search engine. So if you can at least figure out a rough area of where you might go, who you might talk to, then I think it gets a little bit easier from there. But the reality is that if you start a statement with, I'm a transfer student and I don't know where blah, blah, blah is, then nobody's going to judge you, because the assumption would be, yeah, well, of course you don't know where this thing is because you just got here. And so I think that that can maybe help ease that conversation just a little bit, is to kind of frame it in that kind of context. All right, so I've been talking for a minute. I just want to kind of pause again and check in. the things that are coming up for folks, questions, thoughts.
So Allison, there are lots of questions and great conversation in the chat of people just talking about how they get connected as they're making this transition, and things to do, things to look out for. And so I think it's paralleling very well with your conversation of one, being willing to talk and ask that question, being brave in that space. So where do I find the resources, tutoring, advising, writing center, things of that nature. And so really rich conversation happening there. And I think Matt just dropped a line talking about the T-shirt exchange that App State Office of Transfer Services has done for years. Really cool. As Matt dropped in, bring your old T-shirt and get a fresh App State T-shirt. But it also creates that opportunity for students who are new to the community to begin asking questions. So I'm picking up my T-shirt because I want my swag, but I'm also interested in figuring this component out. What exactly is the Writing Center? What can you tell me a little bit about that? So please take advantage of those opportunities and any other opportunity that allows you to get in space with people and ask those questions that may be intimidating to ask about in settings like this, where you're like, well, maybe I should know, but I'm gonna wait till I see Beth one-on-one, at the T-shirt exchange, or when I see Matt in the hallway, or at the pizza slice and advice session. But take advantage of those opportunities and have your questions. I often go into spaces with a little note card or post-it note with questions or comments or feedback or things that I want to provide, and it helps me kind of stay on track and ensure my question is answered or at least brought forward. So be brave, as Allison is saying, and ask away.
Thanks, Alex. Those of you who are asking about how to find different places and how to think about that, I am going to talk more about Canvas resources here in just a second. So I don't know exactly what those questions are, but hopefully we'll answer it. And if not, then we can do that at the end. But a couple other things that I think are important to emphasize around stress and resiliency is self-talk. So I have had many, maybe almost all of the conversations that I have with folks in counseling being oriented toward incredibly negative self-talk and folks just being so harsh on themselves and expecting things of themselves that they don't even remotely close to expect of other people. And so a lot of the work that I do is focused on self-compassion and fostering that and having more conversations about how to talk to yourself minimally neutrally, even if you can't get to that place where it's positively, but in the context of stress and adjustment and transition, transfer, I think self-talk is something that you're probably going to start to notice a lot more. That voice is going to get pretty loud in your head. And however that shows up for you, I think it's important to kind of acknowledge the things that are contributing to that and how you can support yourself or get your needs met, rather than criticizing yourself or trying to motivate yourself through shame is something that folks do a lot. I should be doing my homework right now. I should know XYZ. And so being able to have more neutral conversations with yourself and eventually hopefully positive conversations with yourself where you can say, okay, yeah, it's going to take me some time to adjust to this and I'm not going to know everything and it's okay to ask questions and to be vulnerable. And so that's something that I could talk about for hours and hours. So I will stop there, but just something that I encourage you to think about. This next piece I've talked about a little bit already, but I think one of the things that can make the self-talk feel most negative is if you're comparing your experience to somebody else's. If you're saying, wow, they look like they have it all together. They look like they're adjusting really well. They have all these friends. They're making great grades. And the reality is that you have no clue unless you have superpowers and can read minds or something like that, which I don't have, but other people might. That assumption that we're making of they probably experience life in this way, or they think this thing about me. And if you don't have those superpowers, the reality is you have no idea what other people's experiences are and what they're going through. There are a lot of people I know that have 4.0s and are incredibly involved and connected on campus and outwardly portray themselves as doing really well. And I'm talking to them about the eating disorder that they have because of their perfectionism and their striving, right? So things are not always what they seem. And so that's why I really strongly encourage folks to go based on your experience and what you want and you need, and that individual experience over everything else. Because a lot of times people don't talk about the things that are hard. That's not what you see on social media. You just don't. And so if you're comparing your life and your realness because you're experiencing it to that stuff, then it's not going to compare, but you're comparing to fantasy versus a reality. So that's something that, again, I have lots of conversations about. And so these last two are ways to find a community, which we're going to talk about in a bit, and ways to ask for help and support, which is going to be on the next slide here. So I'm not going to talk about those right now. So some of the dimensions of wellness that Alex mentioned, I'm going to get rid of that a little bit there. There we go. Some of those dimensions of wellness that Alex mentioned, how to navigate physical, spiritual, emotional, social, environmental, all of those things are part of our human experience. And so you're going to have needs that are going to need to be met as part of all of those kind of dimensions. And there's definitely a lot of overlap between those and ways that those kind of interact. But typically, the expectation is that there are going to be resources on your campus or in your community that help you find more connection around these areas of wellness. So there might be offices that have one or more of these as part of what they do, but you should be able to find something that you need in all of these categories. But again, just kind of a matter of finding it. So you got to do a little bit of exploring. If we are not on campus, or if your campus is not on campus in the fall semester, or when you're thinking about transferring, you're going to be probably doing a lot of internet exploring. Maybe some in-person exploring would be ideal. But I really just encourage people to wander around. That is how I have found so many things here on campus when I moved here for my job, was to just walk around the campus. And there are times that I've been like, oh, there's that residence hall that somebody told me about when I had the conversation, had no clue where that was. And just being able to kind of orient yourself to space, or at least to the spaces that you're going to be in. So I know a lot of times folks will go kind of scope out where their classes are going to be before their first day, so that it relieves some of the anxiety of that and what that looks like. But you can be really thoughtful about what your presence on campus looks like, whether virtually or otherwise, by connecting to different resources in different groups, like some of these that are listed here. So I could talk all day about the counseling center. I'm sure Alex could talk all day about wellness and prevention, and we won't, because you might not be coming to app, and the way that their services function may look really different than ours. But I think broadly, there are places that folks can go, resources, services that folks can utilize on campuses for mental health and wellness. So if you know going into this transition that you really struggled with adjustment, and you know that you really need somebody to talk to, all right, see what options for counseling are available, whether on campus or in the community, depending on what your resources look like. If you know that you really need medication and you're transferring from far away and you want to be able to facilitate that quickly, figure out what student health does and what recommendations they have for those medications and getting that stuff transferred so that you can find and have what you need. If you really love exercise, explore what opportunities are available for movement and what that looks like, whether again on campus or in the community. And I would imagine that most, I would say maybe medium to large size institutions, maybe not all small institutions, are going to have individual offices or places, locations for these things. And even if you're going to a small institution, there are going to be ways to get connected to the things that you need. It just might not be in the format that it looked like on your previous campus. Academic resources, I think, surprisingly, somehow, are the things that I end up talking about the most in the conversations that I'm having with students. So I guess if they're already in the counseling center, I'm not talking to them about the counseling center. But I find that students feel very trapped, very isolated in their classes with folks, whether it be because it's intimidating to talk to their peers, or right now because they're not on campus and interacting with folks. And there's a lot of pressure and intimidation around academic performance. And so very regularly, there are opportunities available for students to get connected and get those resources and supports that they need. And here I'm listing some of those things that I'm basing off of App State's campus, but there are advisors, tutors, peers, staff members, tons of people to talk to about these things and to get the support that you need in classes. So that doesn't have to be limited to just your instructor. And that's something that I think folks have a hard time with sometimes, is thinking about, well, if I'm struggling in this class, it makes sense I would talk to this person, but maybe not feeling connected or heard by that person, and figuring out what other resources are available and how those might influence career trajectories. The social pieces can look 5 billion different ways. Here we have Engage, which is fantastic, and I refer students to all the time to think about and talk about, but tons of ways to get involved on or off campus. And part of it is what matters to you, what is important to you. We have a Quidditch team here, which is something that folks are super excited about when they learn, and that I love to talk to people about. Some people are really involved in leadership or service or their faith. And those are things that are available in some format in any community that you're going to be going into. Again, whether or not it's formal through the university or institution or not, those are going to be things that you could access in another way. It's just that creativity component. What's your expectation, and how are you limiting yourself based on that expectation, versus how can you broaden it to think about ways that you might be able to compromise or find aspects of what you need, even if it's not perfect or completely what you want or what you're looking for. And things that I don't talk about with folks as much, but that sometimes come up as important, things related to financial aid, housing, or any kind of legal support that folks may need. There are going to be resources available for that. It's just a matter of finding them. And so I think something that App does really well is they do orientation, and they say, hey, here are all of these resources, here are all these places that you could potentially go for these things. And I love our website and the ways that we kind of showcase what services you might get from what places. And so my hope is that any institution that you're going to be transferring to is going to have some way of finding answers to the questions that you have, even if it takes a little bit of time to get there. Any questions or thoughts as part of this?
Allison, one thought I would throw in is just about access to these services. And Matt and Beth, you all please correct me here. I think the majority of participants are anticipating a transfer in App State, but do we have others that may be transferring elsewhere, or are interested in engaging on other university campuses? And if so, my point being, understand your fee structure. So as you're transferring in, you're paying your tuition, you're paying your student fees, know what your student fees cover. All of the resources that Allison has covered today, those are included in your fees at App State, and I would imagine many other institutions is the same. I do know of colleges and universities that offer sort of a pay for service that you desire, kind of an on-demand service acquisition. So if you don't anticipate ever coming to campus and making use, say, of the student health clinic, students can opt out of paying that fee on some campuses. At App State, if you're a full-time, fully enrolled student, those fees are built into your tuition and fee structure. And so the reason I want to highlight that is you've prepaid for access and services at App State when you are fully enrolled. And so I strongly encourage you to get involved in the student clubs, the orgs, because you've paid a minor fee there, an activity fee. You've already paid a recreational fee. So even if you don't know anything about skiing, I encourage you to go over to outdoor programs and sign up for an outing to get on the slopes here in the area. If you know nothing about fly fishing, there are opportunities to learn about fly fishing here. If you are ill, if you're sick and you're like, well, don't want to pay a large copay for something, access student health services because it's been prepaid. There are very few services that you would have any sort of copay on through the university, and those additional pay elements for medical services are minimal. And so, know your fee structure, know what services you've already got access to, and be a well-informed, educated member of the community to take full advantage of those service opportunities.
Absolutely. And I also want to give a shout out to transfer services, because if you're transferring here to App specifically, that office is there, has staff that's available to talk to you about any and all of these resources and help you get connected to them and help you navigate that adjustment. So I get calls and referrals saying, hey, yeah, so-and-so in so-and-so office talked to me about the counseling center. And that's how I got to where I am now. So again, it doesn't mean that you have to know exactly where you're going, but if you can ask somebody, then they can help you figure that out. And so I think transfer services does a really great job of doing that here. And my hope would be that is happening in other places. And even if it's not a transfer, maybe a specific office, I think a lot of times admissions folks can talk to you about those resources too. So this last part is a part that is more of like a reflection for you all to have and to think about, and we can absolutely have conversations around it. But these are some of the questions that I would encourage you to ask yourself and to ask other people. So if you're thinking about getting involved on campus, feeling connected, feeling like you belong, feeling like you're getting the college experience that you want, the ways that you kind of navigate or have your decision tree of where you go or what you look for, what are your interests and passions? And if you don't know what those are, how can somebody help you figure out what they are? There are offices that do that and help you navigate that. So if you don't have an easy answer to that question, that's okay. Somebody can help you figure that out. And once you figure out what your interests and passions are, then you can figure out, okay, what opportunities are available for me to engage with this interest or this passion. So if it's community service, if it's recreation, if it's a faith-based organization, those are things that you can do. If it's Quidditch, there are ways that you can find those resources based on what your interests and passions are. And it doesn't have to be, again, as formal as like a student organization, but you can at least know what's here in your area. I had somebody talking to me about roller skating pre-pandemic, and I had no idea that we had a skate rink here, but apparently we do. So that's something that I learned as part of this and continue to learn. So there are ways, even if they're informal, to find ways to get connected in the community. What kind of commitment are you hoping to make? And this is a question that I put out here very intentionally, because sometimes being involved in an organization requires a commitment. And when you get connected to something like student leadership, student government, that's something that might be more intensive than maybe going to a monthly meeting of something, or just going to an event hosted by transfer services or the counseling center or wellness and prevention. So those are things that I would encourage you to consider, is what kind of involvement do I want? What kind of commitment do I want to make? And how can I figure out what things fit with that? What does your institution offer? So there might be things that you don't even know that you're interested in that you find as part of your involvement there. So once you get here on campus and you learn about some of the opportunities, you see a flyer on campus, or you get an email about an opportunity that might not be something that you're originally like, oh yeah, definitely, this is something that I really want to do, but it could be something that you want to explore, that you want to think about. And so being willing to be open to trying new things, even if it doesn't fall into that specific category of, I will only get involved if it meets XYZ criteria. So just kind of thinking about what's there and what's available. Same goes for your community. What's out there? And it might be that you drive around whatever area you're going to, and just kind of see what piques your interest. It might be a restaurant that you're really excited about, or that you are looking for a place to work off campus. And so you're driving around and you're looking for hiring signs. So there are ways for you to build some of those connections and to find things that you're interested in by just going out and seeing what you run into when you get there, or exploring websites, seeing what you find when you get there. And then that piece that I was talking about at the beginning, I have no idea how to make friends because I haven't done it since I was 5. The reality is that sometimes that's awkward and that can be okay. And also the reality is that the other person that you're communicating with probably feels that same way too. Making friends is weird. It just is. And sometimes it works out well and sometimes it doesn't. And that's, again, I think something that I want to highlight as that individual experience is every person that you interact with is not going to be a connection for you. And that's okay. There are tons of people that I've met in my life that do not react well to my personality style. Folks that don't interact with my therapy style well. And there's still the twinge and it still hurts just a little bit when that experience happens. Sometimes it hurts a lot. And the reality is that there are people who are interested in some of the same things that you are, and who interact with people the way that you do, and who have components of those interests that overlap, or experiences that overlap. You might not find a person who has every single experience that you've ever had, or shares every belief that you have. And if you find enough people who you can connect with on a variety of different things, that's still how you're going to facilitate that connection, that belonging, that support. And going to events is something that's a part of it. Saying yes to things, even if you are unsure about it, asking questions, being vulnerable. All of those are ways that you can connect with people and increase support. And I know that the last thing y'all want to do is be on a Zoom meeting right now. And I know that people have found a lot of benefit from being on Zoom meetings that are not academically oriented. And right now we're doing therapy on Zoom, and it's really beneficial for folks, and they didn't think that it would be. And so again, it's that expectation of, all right, I'm about to be really bored in this hour-long meeting, but it's not a meeting that you're going into. It's some sort of interaction, some sort of connection that you're trying to make. And on campus, it might be that you go to a club meeting and you decide you don't like it and you never go again. That's okay. It's okay to make a decision, and for that decision to not ultimately be the thing that works out for you. And it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be a little bit awkward sometimes. And if you kind of change those expectations for how you might go into a situation, I think it makes things a lot easier. It takes a lot of the pressure off of it if you are able to say, like, all right, well, I hope that this goes well. And if it doesn't, then we'll see what happens, and have that openness to trying something else and doing something different rather than getting discouraged. All right. I talked a whole lot, so I'm going to stop talking. If folks have specific questions for me, here's my email. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, but I'm going to turn it over to Alex and let him facilitate Q&A stuff. And I'm going to leave this up here for like 2 more seconds, and then I'm going to stop screen sharing so that we can see each other.
All right. Thank you, Allison. That was awesome. I certainly appreciate everything you have shared and provided. I think it's a truly rich content for our participants and our guests to process and digest and think about their transfer experience, their broader college or university experience that they desire, and then how they matriculate in a manner that allows them to thrive. And I think that's what this is all about, is being attuned to your needs and finding ways to address those needs.